At the end of the first millennium BC, the Roman state entered a period of dramatic political change. As Rome expanded beyond the Italian peninsula, its traditional republican order, rooted in the city-state model, began to crumble. Extended overseas campaigns disconnected Roman soldiers from political life, leaving their commanders as their only source of authority. Marius and Sulla, Pompey and Caesar, military leaders who commanded absolute loyalty from their troops, would ultimately fracture the Republic, unleashing decades of civil wars that led to autocratic rule. From this bloody internal strife emerged the final victor, Octavian Augustus, Caesar's adopted heir. After his decisive victory over Mark Antony at Actium, Augustus proclaimed himself princeps, first among the senators, in 27 BC. Though the Roman state maintained its republican facade, Augustus had consolidated all important offices under his control, wielding virtually unlimited power. That is why Augustus is generally regarded as Rome's first emperor. The empire's newfound stability and centralized power, achieved after decades of civil wars, freed Rome's formidable military for a new wave of conquest. Initially, this expansion bypassed the northern frontiers. Augustus showed little interest in sending his legions across the Rhine into Germania's dense forests and treacherous marshlands, a region devoid of valuable resources or established trade routes. However, this changed dramatically in 16 BC when the Sicambri, Usipetes, and Tencteri tribes launched a devastating raid into Roman Gaul, destroying a Roman legion in their wake. From that moment, the conquest of Germania became a paramount objective for the imperial war machine. In the wake of the Germanic incursion, Augustus arrived in Gaul personally to oversee preparations for the impending campaigns. To finance military wages, he established a mint in Lugdunum and ordered a census of Gaul to improve tax collection. The direct military preparations, however, fell to his stepson, Nero Claudius Drusus. Under Drusus's leadership, a network of fortresses and forts rose along the Rhine, linked by military roads. In the coastal regions, the Romans built a fleet for riverine and coastal operations. Most ambitious of all, they dug a canal connecting the Rhine to Lake Flevo, creating a safer passage for vessels into the North Sea. Such extensive military infrastructure enabled Drusus to launch his first campaign against the Germanic tribes in 12 BC. Leading 4 legions and hundreds of ships, he swiftly conquered the Frisi and Cauci, and in the following year, the Sicambri and Catti, establishing fortresses and bridges as he advanced. Yet Drusus's triumphant progress nearly ended in disaster. Near Arbalo, in Cheruscan territory, his army barely escaped destruction in a cunningly laid ambush. The Germanic weaponry proved especially lethal to the Romans. Their preferred weapon, the framea, a versatile spear deadly both as a throwing weapon and in close combat, could pierce the legionaries' chainmail armor, lorica hamata, with alarming ease. Faced with the need for better protection, the Romans adopted the distinctive segmented armor that would become a symbol of the legion's might, lorica segmentata, though the Romans themselves knew it by a different name, now lost to history. Drusus would never complete his conquest of Germania. In 9 BC, a fatal fall from his horse brought his campaigns to an abrupt end. His brother, Tiberius, assumed command, though he preferred diplomatic solutions over military force. Tiberius secured peace with the Sicambri and resettled them near Vetira, and later, through a calculated show of force, brought the Cherusci into submission. This pacification paved the way for Roman influence in the region, introducing Roman currency, taxation, and the recruitment of auxiliary troops. Among these auxiliaries rose a young Germanic nobleman, Arminius. Arminius was born to Segemur, a Cheruscan chieftain who led his people's resistance against Roman expansion. In 12 BC, as Drusus advanced deeper into Germania, the Cherusci, Suebi, and Sigambri sealed a blood alliance against Rome, consecrating their pact with the sacrifice of 20 Roman officers. Arminius, then merely 7 to 9 years old, may have witnessed these sacrificial rites. His youth unfolded amid constant warfare, where the chief's son first mastered the art of combat. When Tiberius compelled the Cherusci to accept the status of Roman Federati in 4 AD, Arminius was surrendered to Rome as a hostage to guarantee his father's loyalty. Unlike other young hostages, however, Arminius was deemed too mature for traditional Roman education. Instead, he was granted command of an auxiliary unit of his fellow Cherusci, stationed at one of Rome's Germanic bases. There he underwent advanced military training and even mastered Latin, though given the fact that Arminius had been raised to hate the Romans, he likely studied their military organization with a hidden intent, methodically observing both its strengths and weaknesses. The Roman historian Velleius Paterculus, who served in the cavalry during this period, offered a vivid description of Arminius. A young man of noble birth, brave in action and alert in mind, possessing an intelligence quite beyond the ordinary barbarian, he showed in his countenance and in his eyes the fire of the mind within. He had been associated with us constantly on private campaigns and had even attained the dignity of equestrian rank. Velleius's emphasis on Arminius's elevation to equestrian status reveals much. Such an honor was not lightly bestowed. It had to be earned through merit. Between 4 and 6 AD, Arminius served under Tiberius in his campaigns against various Germanic tribes, commanding auxiliary forces. These troops were likely intended to join Tiberius's planned expedition against Maroboduus, chief of the Marcomanni, but these plans were abruptly abandoned when the Great Illyrian Revolt erupted in the south. Arminius is believed to have accompanied Tiberius in his campaign against the Illyrians, returning to his homeland only in 8 AD after his father Segemur's death. There, as the newly elected leader of the Cherusci, he found himself face to face with Germania's new governor, Publius Quinctilius Varus. Unlike his future adversary, Arminius, Varus left a notable mark in historical accounts. His Roman career flourished from the start, as his administrative talent quickly earned him widespread recognition. In 7 BC, Varus secured the prestigious appointment of Governor of Africa. Its governors were appointed by the Senate, meaning Varus commanded respect not only from Augustus, but from the entire Roman nobility. The following year, Augustus elevated him to governor of Syria, placing 3 legions under his command. Velleius Paterculus famously noted that Varus entered the rich province a poor man, but left it a rich man and the province poor. Even if true, this is mere scapegoating. Any Roman official would have acted the same in his place. Beyond his duties in Syria, Varus held authority over the vassal kingdom of Judea. When King Herod the Great, Rome's puppet ruler, died in 4 BC, a massive rebellion engulfed Judea. Varus's response was swift and decisive. Leading 2 legions and auxiliary troops totaling more than 20,000 men, he marched into the troubled province. The ensuing campaign proved both effective and merciless. Varus reduced 2 major cities to ashes, while the capture of Jerusalem ended with the crucifixion of 2,000 rebellious prisoners. Countless more Jews, including women and children, were sold into slavery. The War of Varus, as the Judean campaign came to be known, only strengthened Augustus's faith in his lieutenant's abilities. In 7 AD, the emperor dispatched Varus to Germania, along with orders to fully integrate it into the Roman Empire. Varus unleashed the full weight of Roman administration: fines, penalties, hostage-taking, and tribute collection, sparking fierce resentment among the Germanic tribes. Roman historians would later condemn Varus for his harsh methods of enforcing Roman law in the territories east of the Rhine. As Cassius Dio wrote, he strove to change them more rapidly. Besides issuing orders to them as if they were slaves, he exacted money as he would from subject nations. In essence, Varus's forced Romanization showed complete disregard for local customs. It was only a matter of time before his actions would ignite an anti-Roman conspiracy, led by none other than the Cheruscan chief Arminius. Notably, Arminius's father-in-law, Augustus, attempted to warn Varus, but the governor dismissed these alerts as mere slander. When Varus's army departed their summer camp in September of 9 AD, marching toward winter quarters on the Rhine, he readily accepted Arminius's report of a distant Germanic uprising and his offer to guide the Roman forces there. The legionaries under Varus's command marched on, entirely unaware of the horror that awaited them over the next 4 days. The exact size of Varus's army at Teutoburg Forest remains debated among scholars. Ancient sources, particularly Velleius Paterculus, state that Varus commanded 3 legions, 3 cavalry alae, and 6 auxiliary cohorts. At full strength, these units would have numbered between 22,000 and 23,000 fighting men. However, Roman frontier forces rarely operated at their paper strength, leading modern researchers to suggest a more conservative estimate of 12,000 to 14,000 troops. The Roman column also included a substantial baggage train carrying civilians, women, children, slaves, and the very Roman administrators whose heavy-handed rule had provoked such resentment among the Germanic peoples. While the exact numbers of these camp followers are unknown, historians estimate they numbered several thousand. As evening fell on the first day of the march, Arminius and his auxiliary forces departed from the main army, claiming they would conduct reconnaissance and gather reinforcements. Varus had no reason to doubt Arminius's loyalty. After all, the Germanic leader held Roman citizenship, had distinguished himself in previous campaigns, and appeared utterly devoted to Augustus. Yet the man Varus trusted as his guide harbored a single burning ambition: to forever shatter Rome's grip on Germania. The second day of march brought mounting difficulties for the Roman column. Their advance slowed to a crawl through increasingly treacherous forested terrain. The weather turned vicious, with fierce winds and rain battering the troops. According to Cassius Dio, tree limbs fell down upon the soldiers, further disrupting their formation. As twilight approached, with the men weary and soaked through, their attention wavering, the first attacks erupted from the forest. Germanic warriors, unencumbered by heavy equipment, struck both flanks simultaneously, enveloping Varus's forces while unleashing a deadly barrage of javelins. For the beleaguered Romans, there could be no withdrawal. Their escape route back from the Teutoburg Forest had been completely sealed. The Germanic assault struck with devastating effect. The initial attack targeted the Roman cavalry, whose exposed horses presented vulnerable targets. The legionary foot soldiers found themselves in an equally desperate situation, struggling to advance through ground now strewn with dead horses, fallen comrades, and broken wagons, all while enduring the relentless tribal assault. The mass of civilian followers proved particularly fatal to the Romans' defense, preventing the legionaries from forming proper battle lines and leaving them outnumbered at every point of contact. The question of why Varus led his troops in such a vulnerable formation has puzzled historians since Roman times. Most likely, suspecting no imminent threat, the governor saw little need to maintain battle order. Yet despite the shock of the initial assault, Varus demonstrated remarkable composure in the face of crisis. Upon spotting defensible high ground, he swiftly directed his men to establish a fortified encampment. As the legionaries constructed defenses, the column's rear struggled to escape the treacherous forest. Relentless rainfall had transformed the terrain into thick mud, severely hampering the progress of both soldiers and supply wagons. Meanwhile, Varus gathered his senior commanders to determine their strategy. They presumably decided to make for the river Lippe, which could lead them to the safety of Roman strongholds along the Rhine. Recognizing the gravity of their situation, the governor ordered the baggage train burned. Its defense had already cost too many lives. With provisions sufficient only for a few days' march, the Romans faced a grim reality. They must either break through or face annihilation. As dawn broke, the Roman army struck camp and resumed its westward march. According to Cassius Dio, the column maintained far better order than the previous day, thanks to the more open terrain. The Germanic warriors persisted in their unrelenting assaults on the flanks and rear of the Roman formation, steadily eroding both morale and manpower. These losses, however, would pale in comparison to what lay ahead. On the third day's afternoon, the Roman column encountered a hill that dominated the landscape, rising 110 meters above the surrounding terrain. Its ancient name is lost to history, which is why it's now known by its modern name, Calcrisa. Today, the plain stretching northeast of the hill is used for agriculture, but in ancient times, this entire area was swampy and forested. The only viable path forward followed the hill's base through the Calcrisa Nevader Depression, a narrow passage extending 6 kilometers in length and barely 1 kilometer across. High groundwater levels further confined movement to a sandy ridge barely 200 meters wide. It was, in every respect, the perfect location for an ambush. The archaeological excavations at Calcrisa, begun in 1987, have revealed crucial insights into the battle's final stages. Most importantly, researchers discovered the remains of an extensive turf wall, stretching 400 meters along the road at the gorge's narrowest point. This fortification further constricted the already confined passage while providing an excellent platform for javelin throwers. The wall, 5 meters wide at its foundation, was concealed by dense vegetation and had a narrow drainage channel at its rear to prevent erosion. Atop the earthwork stood woven fences or a small palisade. Initially, researchers thought the wall too sophisticated to be of Germanic construction, even considering Arminius's first-hand knowledge of Roman military engineering. This interpretation, however, was swiftly abandoned when excavations yielded numerous Roman artifacts along the wall's left flank, unmistakable evidence of a massacre that had taken place there. We will follow this interpretation for now. In ominous silence, the Roman legionaries advanced along the narrow sandy path. The confined trail permitted no more than 5 men abreast, forcing those on the right side to trudge through the swamp's muddy edges. Out of nowhere, piercing cries erupted from the nearby woods, followed instantly by a devastating barrage of spears. Some missiles clattered against helmets and breastplates with sharp metallic sound, like hailstones battering a metal roof. Others thudded heavily into shields, embedding themselves deep in the wooden cores. Many found vulnerable flesh, faces, throats, limbs. The whistling of falling spears, the loud impacts on shields and armor, the bellowed commands of centurions, and the anguished screams of the wounded melded into an overwhelming cacophony that shook even the most battle-hardened veterans. Behind the wall, the Germanic warriors felt their spirits surge to extraordinary heights. At last, they beheld their tormentors, those who had slaughtered their kin, seized their territories, and corrupted their leaders, rendered helpless and exposed. Seeing the devastation wrought by their spear volleys, the tribesmen poured through breaches in the earthwork. Most legionaries, gripped by terror and confusion, could offer little resistance. Even their sophisticated armor proved futile. When several barbarians converged upon a single Roman, the plate armor provided no protection against well-aimed strikes at vulnerable throats, legs, and ankles. Trapped between the earthwork and marsh, the Roman forces found themselves tactically paralyzed. The confined terrain prevented the legionaries from forming their characteristic deep ranks, where their sophisticated battle tactics could prove decisive. With communication between various sections of the column severed, individual cohorts were forced to fight in isolation. Yet this did not spell immediate disaster. The cohorts fought on with unwavering discipline. Archaeological findings indicate that at one point, the Romans even mounted an assault on the wall. This valiant attempt ended in tragedy when a section of the fortification collapsed, burying many soldiers beneath its rubble. As Varus's army reached the gorge's end, one part of the Roman force broke away from the main column, pressing northwest along the swamp's edge. The split is confirmed by archaeological evidence showing diverging artifact trails. Historians generally link this to the alleged flight of Nummunius Valla. Velleius Paterculus provides a stark account of his fate. Valla Nummunius set a fearful example in that he left the infantry unprotected and in flight tried to reach the Rhine with his squadrons of horse. But fortune avenged his act, for he did not survive those whom he had abandoned, but died in the act of deserting them. Did Valla really lose his nerve, or did he act on Varus's orders? We shall never know. As the brutal third day drew to its close, the surviving legionaries made one final attempt to construct a defensive camp. Yet their efforts proved futile. Depleted manpower, lost equipment, and relentless Germanic attacks rendered their labors meaningless. The fourth day brought even harsher weather conditions. Fierce winds made throwing pila impossible, while relentless rainfalls seeped beneath the leather coverings of Roman shields, waterlogging their wooden cores and making them too heavy to wield effectively. Meanwhile, Arminius's ranks had swelled with the arrival of fresh allies, tribes that had previously hesitated to challenge Rome. Under mounting Germanic pressure, the Roman army entered its final agony. With escape now impossible, the Roman commanders faced their final grim choice between death by their own hand or surrender to the enemy. Chionius, one of Varus's senior officers, chose to throw himself upon the victor's mercy. Varus chose to throw himself on the blade. Even this final act drew sharp criticism from Velleius Paterculus, who remarked with evident contempt that the general had more courage to die than to fight, for, following the example of his father and grandfather, he ran himself through with his sword. News of Varus's death and the loss of his commanders shattered any remaining discipline among the Roman ranks. While some soldiers maintained desperate resistance, others scattered in panic. Many simply surrendered, accepting their fate of torture or enslavement. Though precise death figures from Teutoburg Forest are unknown, it is generally accepted that Varus's army was virtually annihilated, with only a fortunate few reaching Roman territory. The Germanic forces, by contrast, likely suffered minimal losses. This is the established historical narrative surrounding the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. Recent archaeological discoveries, however, have prompted its reassessment. In 2016, researchers unearthed another rampart approximately 125 meters north of the first wall, running parallel to it. Unlike the southern fortification, this structure had a protective V-shaped ditch on its northern side, a characteristic element of Roman military engineering. The discovery of a dolabra, a Roman entrenching tool, near the original wall raised further questions about its builders. And most tellingly, a hoard of 220 Roman coins, likely a legion's treasury, was found between the two walls. These findings have led archaeologists to challenge the long-held Germanic rampart theory and consider a compelling alternative. Both walls were actually part of a hastily constructed Roman marching camp. While these findings reshape our understanding of the battle's final phase, they do not fundamentally alter its tragic story. The irregular construction of the ramparts suggests they were built hurriedly by desperate men, possibly during the last day of combat. The camp's modest size, sufficient only for 3,000 to 4,000 soldiers, indicates that most of Varus's 3 legions had perished before reaching Calcrisi-Nivedere. And, if we are to trust this new theory, it was within these hastily built walls that the remnants of the Roman army made their last stand, where Varus took his own life, and where some soldiers attempted a final breakout among the marsh's edge. Archaeologists are still debating who built the walls, the ambushers or the ambushed. Recent evidence, however, increasingly points towards the Romans. In any case, the victory achieved by Arminius was absolute. Exploiting the terrain and drawing upon his Roman military training, he had crushed the era's most formidable fighting force in just 3 days. The scale of defeat was so catastrophic that it became known as Claudius Variana, the Varian Disaster. The casualties were staggering. Rome lost approximately 1/10 of its entire standing army. The 17th, 18th, and 19th legions were completely destroyed. Perhaps most devastating of all, the Aquilae, the golden eagles that served as sacred standards, fell into Germanic hands. For the Roman army, the loss of these eagles represented the ultimate disgrace. Arminius remained on the battlefield after his triumph. His Germanic warriors honored their fallen companions, meticulously collecting their weapons for burial rites. The legionary eagles, the most prized spoils of war, were distributed among Cheruscan allies. Upon discovering Varus's corpse, Arminius ordered his head severed and dispatched to Maroboduus, chief of the Marcomanni, as a symbol of Rome's newfound vulnerability. The Teutoburg Forest quickly turned into hallowed ground for the Germanic peoples. Within its groves, Arminius's warriors created stone altars where they sacrificed captured Roman tribunes and centurions in ritual ceremonies. Some warriors chose to leave their plunder within the forest, both as sacred offerings to their gods and as grim warnings to future invaders. This practice likely explains one of Calcrisa's most remarkable archaeological finds, a silver-plated iron mask. Though originally part of a parade helmet from Gaul or Thrace, such ceremonial pieces held little practical value for the tribesmen. Having stripped its silver plating, they apparently displayed the mask, either by the earthwork or suspended from a tree, as a testament to their triumph. The annihilation of Varus's legions shook Rome to its core. Augustus fell into profound despair, letting his hair grow unkempt for months while repeatedly beating his head against the wall, lamenting, "Quinctilius Varus, legiones rede." The battle's survivors were banished from Italian soil, and the destroyed legions were permanently removed from the army's roster. Arminius had achieved what few before him could claim, not merely defeating a Roman army, but effectively halting Rome's expansion across the Rhine. Though Rome would exact brutal vengeance upon the rebellious tribes, all attempts to establish direct Roman control in Germania would be abandoned. Until the end of classical antiquity, the Rhine would remain the boundary between civilization and barbarism. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, help others discover it too. Hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for the upcoming episodes. Until next time.